What's up, my Brocklights, and welcome back to another reaction video. Today we have the same guy who I actually reacted to the first time, but their new video, which they hinted at in their last video, is called What is the Worst Weapon in Ultrakill? I have my own opinion on what that is. I've already watched this video, but I'd like to cover a lot of the things that they break down, things I agree with, things I disagree with, and why I think their assessment is on and off generally pretty good. So yeah, let's just hop right in. I love community opinions, so this is gonna be great.
What is the worst weapon in Ultrakill? This is a question that hasn't really been answered recently.
There I am.
And since the recent patches have buffed a lot of the bad weapons, I figured it would be cool for me to make a video on this topic. Also, because I haven't seen anyone talk about the weapon that I actually believe is the worst, I do want to preface, I don't believe that any weapon in this game is bad. Hell, I would say every weapon in the game, including alternates, is evenly balanced. It's kind of crazy that in a game
I generally
where you
agree.
have 15 weapons equipped at once, I'm actually using all 15 of those weapons. Also, I'm not going to mention a single rocket launcher or rail cannon, because they don't have alternates, so you still use them.
I think to preface, I think that every weapon in the game feels good. There's a difference between weapons being good and feeling good, right? Pretty much, I would say 99% of the weapons in this game feel good, right? They feel really good to use, they have a niche purpose, and their execution of certain tech related to that purpose is really nice to do because it yields an adequate outcome. So that's really good. I think we're in a very balanced state in the game right now. However, there are a lot of weapons that aren't actually that good on the higher levels of the game. So yeah, main distinction I'm trying to make here, pretty much every weapon feels good. Not every weapon is good, as in, like, you know, fits into a loadout, into a certain playstyle, etc. So yeah, let's continue. I
mean, all of them are good anyways, except for you. You're kind of mid. I made a whole video about that if you want to watch it. Anyways, let's get started. First weapon on the list.
Agree to disagree about that.
The Slab Marksman. This weapon used to be bad a while ago, but it's kind of become the meme bad weapon, despite the fact that it's really, really good. And because I use this weapon over the default, I'd like to talk about it for a bit. The main reason I love this weapon is the simple fact of 5.25 damage per coin. And a huge factor about it, right? There are some enemies that were added in fraud that those weapons are actually pretty good against. I don't think Max talks about the fact that the weapon doesn't rely on enemies having heads in order to do max damage, whereas the regular variant, the default marksman, requires enemies to have heads to get 4 damage per split. If an enemy doesn't have a head, it'll deal 3, and if they don't have a limb or a head, it'll only deal 2. So you actually get less damage overall if you're dealing with enemies without heads or limbs, and you get a mix of both if you're dealing with enemies with limbs but no head. So dealing 5.25 damage, regardless of if an enemy has a head or not, is really, really good. Another thing, if the enemy does have a head, the amount of style that you get from the headshot multiplier that occurs is insane. You normally only get like 1x ricochet with the default marksman, but with the Slab Marksman, you get a 3x combo with a headshot multiplier if you're hitting an enemy like a Cerberus or a Swords Machine, something like that, right? And that can give you a crazy amount of style, like almost an entire letter grade depending on what your style rank is. So it's something to really keep in mind when using the weapon. Pretty much the same as a charged slab piercer shot. 1 coin is able to one-shot almost every fodder enemy, including Radiants.
Especially the Radiant drones.
Very useful for cleaning up arenas. Of course, the main downside of the slab is if you miss the split shot, it's a pretty lengthy cooldown and not much damage.
Yeah.
But that just makes the weapon more skillful. Yes, the default is great at hitting multiple targets for decent damage, but I like spin. Anyways.
I actually can't believe they didn't cover one of the coolest parts about it. The spin of the revolver, whenever you hit the split shot, when it does that spin, it resets all of the other revolvers, which is a really nice thing. I've personally been running triple slab lately because of enemies like Mirror Reapers and Providences. That, and they're also really nice against other enemies like Insurrectionists, which don't have heads, etc. But it's really, really nice against those Providences because they take 50% extra damage from revolver shots. And having 3 revolvers to be able to handle them, especially when they're Radiant, that extra chip can actually go a really long way. So in the current meta of the game, with how Providences have so few ways of being able to deal with them, it's really, really nice. So yeah, let's continue.
Second weapon, the Jumpstart Sawblade launcher.
Yes.
Jumpstart.
Very contentious.
This weapon is probably the one I see brought up most commonly when talking about the worst weapon topic. And as someone who also literally uses this weapon, false. Wrong. I'd say it might even be better, or at least evenly matched with the Nailgun variant.
I generally agree.
Don't know how to use it. The jump saw is very good at causing a conduction pop fast, and is much more valuable on higher health enemies, because the conduction pop deals 10 damage to the enemy attached, and each saw that hits the enemy lowers the timer by half a second and adds the 0.5 extra damage after the pop.
Yes.
Just by using
a lot of people
the
don't
jump
know
saw,
that.
you can easily hit around 15 damage in about 2.5 seconds. The problem is, by just using the jump saw, there will be no nails in the enemy, meaning the conduction won't chain to other enemies.
Yes.
But that can easily be fixed by using another nailgun variant. Most notably, the overheat, being the fastest way to output nailgun to an enemy.
I think that
Using this simple conduction.
very, very nice, covering specifically ADA. For those who don't know, when I say ADA, that means alternate, default, alternate, right? Breaking down ADA. That is the alternate attractor, the default overheat, and the alternate jumpstart, right? ADA is a really, really nice loadout. It's really notable for how fast it's able to proc conductions on the jumpstart cooldown, how fast it is to get that jumpstart cooldown on, applied, and then popped. Because the sooner the jumpstart pops, the sooner the cooldown will activate. So think of it this way. If you put the jumpstart cord on an enemy and you wait out the entire 5 seconds, you will then have to wait for the 5-second cooldown, right? So that's about 10 seconds of no jumpstart value, if you think of it that way. But however, if you use a lot of saws, you end up narrowing that down to about, say, 2 seconds on the enemy, and then the 5-second cooldown, which means that in total, your cooldown is looking more a lot like 7 seconds, right? So with the jump saw really helps if you're out of the blue saws, which they cover in a little bit. You can use the jump saw to really help boost that jumpstart cord, because the jumpstart, again, with conduction and stuff like that, is really good for conduction, really good for damage, and also gives you pretty good healing, I believe.
Conduction combo. You can create conduction pops faster and more powerful than the Jumpstart nailgun. Oh, but you can just use another Sawblade launcher to cause the same effect. And yes, that's true, but typically that other variant is the silver saw one, and that one has limited ammo.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I'd rather use those for
Which is
saw
also kind of sad, because like I said in one of my previous videos, the overheat Sawblade launcher does not trigger the jumpstart cord, which is really, really bizarre. Although if you release it at low heat, it actually does. So technically releasing it at low heat is better than max heat. It's really, really weird and complicated. It would be nice if there was some actual explicable way to get that jumpstart cord to proc using the overheat Sawblade, but oh well.
traps. Honestly, building a nailgun build around conduction and saw traps is very fun. All of the variants are useful and can gain more or less value depending on the other variants. But this video is talking about the worst weapons, and nailgun variants aren't bad. Except that one.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next one, I do have to say another thing about the Jumpstart. The Jumpstart weapon itself, most people aren't using it for the primary fire. Most people aren't using the jump nails, right? The primary fire for the nails. They're using the overheat nail gun. I think the two best loadouts currently, I mean, this has been the case since the last update, have been ADA, which is the blue Sawblade, green nail gun, red Sawblade, and then also ADD, which is same thing except you swap it out for the Jumpstart nail gun. All the difference really is that you're trading off the ability to do jumpstarts slightly more often for the ability to add more nails more consistently, right? That's really the only difference there is, because both primary fires are worse than all the other weapons primary fires in the same slot. So yeah, that's something to really consider, that people are mainly focusing on the alt fire, and the Jumpstar's alt fire makes up for most of its strengths already. So it definitely does not deserve to sit anywhere close to the bottom due to that alone.
Maybe? Not really. Let's talk about it. The Attractor Nailgun was originally what this video was going to be about, because when I first had the idea for this video, I believed it to be the worst weapon, completely outclassed by the Attractor Sawblade. But then Broccolite made a video about why the Attractor Nailgun is slept on, and after watching it, yeah, the Attractor Nailgun is slept on.
It is a little bit slept on.
Go watch the video if you want a more in-depth guide on how to properly use the gun. In summary, this thing shreds angels. Most notably, Virtues and Providences, two of the most deadly and high target enemies in the game. And this isn't just from the nail damage bonus, which applies to all nail guns, because they also have a silver nail damage bonus.
Yes, that and powers. Powers also have a weakness.
Is better at shredding these two. After testing, each nail seems to do about 0.5 damage. This thing's a machine gun. The main weakness is, of course, the limited ammo.
There's a couple weaknesses.
You can only kill around 2 to 3 Virtues or Providence before you're either out of ammo or...
Oh, here, I'll add a little addendum here. There's a couple weaknesses. Now, number one, I do want to first say, nails don't actually work as intended. I might go into this a little deeper on a future video. First of all, conduction is busted right now. You can only get like a maximum of 2 damage per conduction pop. which sucks because normally you could get a scalable amount of like, 8 or something conduction damage per pop, not per pop, but like on the first pop, and then every other one is a bit smaller. But anyway, another thing is that nails actually fail to track to magnets if you are on a weird incline compared to where the magnet is. This is especially true if you fire a magnet into the floor while you're standing on the floor, or if you fire a magnet close to a surface that you are close to, because it spawns the magnet weirdly a length in front of you, and if you are close to the wall, it'll spawn the magnet inside the wall, which means that nails actually lose a lot of attraction to that magnet. It's really, really bizarre. And given that magnet attraction is also really screwed up when it comes to stuff like just attaching a magnet to an enemy in general, nails will tend to just fly behind the enemy if you're not too accurate against the enemy, so that kind of defeats the whole purpose of having it in the first place. That's one of the things that really takes away from this weapon, because normally you'd be able to kill a Virtue and a Providence in 33 silver nails each, right? So that means you can kill 3 Virtues or 3 Providences with a single barrage of the blue nail gun in theory. However, that tends to not be the case. You spend usually more like 40 or 45 nails, like Max does here in this example, because a lot of the nails just fly behind the enemy and hit like nothing or something else entirely. Yeah, but that really does suck for this weapon. I think once they fix magnetization, we'll see a lot of these issues sort of fade away, and this weapon might actually get a little bit more limelight. But the way this weapon is designed, or intended to be designed, is actually pretty good, I would say. Is it better than the Saw? I don't know. We really have yet to see a world where like stuff like, magnetization on enemies working and magnetization on surfaces working to a point where we can see nail bombs functioning. Both of those worlds are a bit weird, and then also conduction being worse means that we don't really get to see the ceiling that this weapon could truly reach with its nail output as well. So yeah, that's just some of the unfortunate things about this.
Or it's simply not worsen anymore. But combined with jackhammers, you can wipe out a ton of angels very efficiently. Now the problem is that this is really the weapon's only use, and the Attractor Sawblade gets saw traps. Honestly, I'd still say the Sawblade and Nailgun are evenly balanced. Saw traps do tend to do a lot better in campaign.
I don't know.
In Cybergrind, where saw traps are kind of useless, I feel like the Nailgun is better. Anyways.
I don't know. It's hard to say. I can't agree or disagree, because again, like, the Nailgun hardly functions in this current update. Bad conduction, bad tracking on enemies, and bad nail bombs, because just the game doesn't work. But, in a world where all 3 of those things did work, maybe you could be right. Who knows? I'd love to believe in a world like that, personally.
Next weapon on the chopping block, Default Piercer. This weapon I definitely would have said was the worst before it got buffed. I'm assuming most of you know, but I'm still going to go over it.
Yeah, this weapon's pretty solid now.
Split coins.
Yes.
This is very useful for dealing high damage to multiple targets regardless of range. Because the default revolvers have locational damage, the default piercer can actually deal more damage than the slab. If it hits the head, 7.5 damage.
7.5?
If you hit a limb, 5 damage. Anywhere else, 3 damage.
Yes.
Combined with a coin, you can deal about 9 damage to 2 targets. Each extra coin adds 1 damage. Any more than 1 coin will hit 3 targets.
It is quite solid.
Great, and in my opinion, evenly balances both piercers. I'd still prefer the slab, because 5 damage
generally agree
in less than a second is super nice, and the slab combined with coins can deal about 25 damage to a single target. So I just think the default revolvers are so dinky. They don't feel powerful. That's half the reason why I run all slab.
Yeah, I also run all slab, but just to give like a little bit of a tidbit, because I think it's a very simple weapon, and he explained it pretty simply as it should have been. Just compared to its alternate, the alternate has the benefit, again, that on split coins it does a lot of damage to an enemy, regardless if they have a head or not. As well, it gives you quite a lot of style, because if they have a head, it gives you about a 7 times headshot multiplier, which is really, really sweet. As well, just having the primary fire of a slab gives you a decent amount of healing, decent amount of chip from a range. You can pierce cores and rockets and stuff like that if you want to. So I think that generally the weapons are actually really, really balanced, and I'm happy that they're in the state that they're in. Small reminder though, with the slab revolver, you do get 2.5 extra damage if you pierce through the first enemy, having dealt 5, and then the remainder is dealt to the enemy behind it. So yeah, little fun fact about that if you didn't know that. They're actually very equal in damage if the circumstances are right for both.
Great. Next weapon, the Pump Charge Shotgun. This video has kind of been about why bad weapons aren't actually bad. This, and what I believe the worst weapon in the game, are the exceptions. The Pump Charge Shotgun is like 90% outclassed by the Jackhammer, is what I originally said. I actually rewrote this entire section, because when I was recording clips for this video, I played the cyber grind with every weapon mentioned in this video. Here are the results. This is obviously not a very good metric, because most of these are just from bad plays, not the actual weapons. Except for the one you may notice is missing. Pump charge shotgun. Yeah, wave 67 is really good for me. My PB is 73.
Yeah.
And it's not like I was just playing well and not even using it.
I will say, I mean, like, the pump charge shotgun isn't a bad weapon. The only problem with the pump charge shotgun is that it's utterly outclassed by its alternate, which is just slightly better in every conceivable way. Like, I would say pretty much every conceivable way. There's a few ways that you could argue it's slightly more functional, but in those ways, I wouldn't even take it over the alternate. Yeah, we'll get into that in a second, but I would wager that the reason why you got this wave as opposed to getting a higher wave with the other weapon, the pump charge jackhammer, my favorite hammer, bias aside, I think that you might not know how to use the weapon properly. There's actually a lot of in-depth tech that goes into using the weapon properly and maximizing its value, as opposed to the pump charge shotgun, which just has a hard cap on exactly what it can do. So yeah, we'll see what you have to say, but yeah.
The shotgun. No, this thing actually saved my life multiple times, in ways that I feel like the jackhammer wouldn't have. Now, that isn't to say that I think it's better. I still personally believe jackhammer is better, but they're a lot closer than I originally thought. Let's compare. The jackhammer is much better at outputting high amounts of damage. And I mean high. This weapon is probably the single best damage dealer in the game, mainly due to overpumps adding 7 damage on top of the jackhammer hit. Yellow hits deal 13 damage, and red hits deal 17 damage. If you're really good, 2 yellows and a red. 43 damage.
Yeah, hell, I mean, the raw damage is nice, but...
58 damage. With Insurrectionist taking 1.5 times damage on fire, you can kill one with this combo. Sure, it's a lot of time required to do, but you can still dodge and move around during it. Now, the shotgun will certainly not be...
See, I mean, I'm sitting here watching how you use the weapon. You're not using it wrong, but there are a lot of niche case scenarios that show why that weapon, the pump charge jackhammer, is far more versatile and flexible in a lot more scenarios than this weapon is, for instance. Like, I mean, you have hit stop pumps, which, first of all, they make it actually faster than the pump charge shotgun. The pump charge shotgun takes 1.65 seconds to get a full overpump from the draw. So the draw is 0.45 plus 0.4 times 3, which is 1.65, right? The pump charge jackhammer takes normally 2 full seconds, which is 0.5 times 3, on top of the swap time, which is 0.5. However, with hit stop pumps, by pumping during hit stop, which you've shown that you know, it takes 1.5 seconds, which is actually faster, which means your single target and technically your multi-target is actually faster than with the pump charge shotgun. But I haven't even mentioned pump caches, so I'm gonna let you continue, but then I'll bring up pump caches later.
Dealing nearly as much damage is much better at speed. You can throw out overpumped explosions very fast.
Very common misconception.
Literally no cooldown. And overpump explosions deal 10 damage versus the jackhammer's 7. Very useful for crowd control, and is great at dealing with aerial targets. Most notably, I found it very effective against mind flares and powers. I also tended to use double pumps for an alternative to yellow hits, because they do the same damage, and you can add a projectile boost for an extra 3.5 damage.
Yeah, but...
The main downside is the spread is absolutely horrible.
I'll bring up another thing. The problem with the first and second pumps is that they take so long to get to. I mean, the first swap, you have 0.45 seconds just to do the first shot. With a projectile boost, that's less than 6 damage. It's 5.75 damage, which in most cases doesn't actually matter, but, you know, it can be significant. Because comparing it to other shotguns, you're getting 6.25 damage per P boost due to the pellets actually being 12 pellets and not 10 pellets on the first shot of the pump charge. The first pump only adds 6 pellets, which makes it 4 damage, but that makes the total of a P boost 7.25 damage. But you gotta remember that's 0.4 seconds of investment. And by that point, you've already left the convenient range that the pump charge jackhammer leaves you in. Because the pump charge jackhammer can do its first hit in 0.75 seconds, right? And in that time, you can do a yellow hit, and you can do, because in that time, you can do a yellow hit, and you can add a pump during hit stop, which already gives you 9.5 damage. and that 3.5 damage added on is an explosion, so it can technically hit multiple targets too. Now, the only way that this weapon can actually match that level of damage is if you add another pump, by which point you've invested 1.25 seconds of time, which is nearly double the time that it takes the pump charge jackhammer to get that much damage, for a double pump and a P boost, which would deal 9.25 damage, which isn't even more than the pump charge jackhammer at that rate, which is really sad. Sure, I mean, you could argue, I think it gives you a little bit more healing, which is a bit nice, but you just don't get a backblast, and backblasts are incredibly valuable for evading enemies, for repositioning, and just generally having a more flexible presence across the map by having the option to go anywhere. So I mean, due to that fact alone, I would just say that the pump charge jackhammer is just infinitely better. I mean, you can circumvent the whole 3-hit limiter thing by just hitting twice and then swapping to a new weapon. The thing about the pump charges is that they're very ordinary weapons, right? They don't really fill a particular niche other than a lot of damage, and the only thing you're investing is time. You're not investing any sort of like tech or cooldown, you're just investing time to get value. And you can see a lot of value from this weapon if you're stalling for hard damage, if you're waiting out cooldowns, if you're rocket riding on the side of a map or something, right? If you're playing passively, you can engage aggressively very easily with these weapons, but you get so much more bang for your buck, and you're far more flexible, and you get a backblast if you're using the pump charge jackhammer. So it's just a matter of everything stacking on top of itself, one after the other, that once you take a glance at the way these two weapons actually build themselves up, the pump charge jackhammer just has the bigger blocks to build with, you know what I mean? And that's what makes it sad.
Horrid. That's the one buff I think this weapon needs. Make the spread better. Anyways, that's the summary of my experience using this weapon. And honestly, I might end up using it over the jackhammer. I feel like it meshes really well with my playstyle. Like, it's pretty good when the weapon that you thought was bad and you didn't think you were going to use ends up staling because you're using it so much. Oh, and I actually think it's more 60-40% rather than 90%, like past on the...
Again, like I said, pump charge shotgun is not a bad weapon. So depending on your metric, this can be true, 60-40, right? I believe in the 90-10. Obviously, like the only real thing like working for the pump charge shotgun is that you get a 10 damage explosion as opposed to a 7 damage one, even though you get it faster in the pump charge jackhammer. Pump charge shotgun, 10 damage can be good in a lot of scenarios. However, you got to remind yourself, right? That explosion, the one thing it has going for it, isn't good against a lot of the strongest enemies in the game. So think enemies like Virtues or Sentries, Mind Flayers, and Powers. Although you said it was good against those enemies, you're getting far more value if you just use the pump charge jackhammer instead. Because these enemies, you got to remember, they don't like to group up, and they're by far some of the most threatening enemies in the game. But the fact that they don't like to group up means that you're not going to get that collateral damage with either of these weapons in most cases. So the single target ends up being so much better due to these reasons. And in either case, if you really want to focus on crowd control, you're going to have so many other options that are better. I mean, core snipes, for example, you can do 2 core snipes in the time that you can do an overpump with either of these weapons. FUPs are always going to be good, just pulling a rocket to yourself, because the explosion radius is larger and you do 7 damage, which means there's less fallout, which means there's more coverage, which means there's more damage. Remember, the only role that these two weapons fill is value, but the only cost is time. So yeah, I'll let him wrap up his little bit here, but then I want to talk about my final subject, which is pump caching, which I believe is really important.
Like we said earlier. All right. The final weapon.
All right, I guess that's it. I need to talk about pump caching. Pump caching is basically what takes the entire concept of invest time, get value, that whole tree that makes these two weapons. Pump caching lets you invest slightly more time to get far more value, right? So pump caching, if you don't know, if you decide to commit to an overpump instead of hit stop pumping with the pump charge jackhammer, so take 2 seconds, right? Let's say you're waiting out cooldowns just a little bit longer, or your hard damage just a little bit longer, right? And then you want to engage that enemy. If you fully commit to that overpump, what you can do is instantly add a pump after hitting the enemy. You don't swap to the next hit. You instantly add a pump after that. Now there's a 1 second delay with the primary fire after hitting an enemy. So what you can do is add 2 pumps in that time, 0.5, 0.5, and then you can do a hit stop pump, which means that you've effectively done an overpump in 1 second. A 1 second overpump is extremely invaluable. And the point is you have to do these 2 things back to back. But remember what I said earlier. Now the value that comes with using the pump charge jackhammer is that waiting period. Being able to shrink that waiting period down to get the same value means that you're basically rivaling every other weapon in their own crowd control and single target capabilities. Suddenly that FUP might not be the best idea because now you can do that overpump damage without taking that damage, and now you don't have to aim at that core with a core snipe, and now you can use the backblast from the pump charge jackhammer to get out of danger, right? So 2 hits and now you're out of danger, guess what? Wait 3 seconds, you can do the same thing again. And you can play really coyly this way if you balance that 3-hit limiter. And of course, if you want, you could also just do yellow hit into pump cash, into yellow hit into pump cash, into a red hit, right? Which effectively guarantees that you get the value of the 3-hit limiter across that specific weapon alone, right? You also get to wait for the weapon to regenerate its freshness over time by swapping to other weapons during the red hit cooldown. And you've effectively maximized your damage while also giving yourself time to dodge, time to parry, time to focus on other things. Because again, investing that time means less time doing complex things so that you can invest more into practical things. Pump caching is like an absolute godsend for this weapon. So seeing the pump charge shotgun be represented anything close to that, to me, feels extremely generous. So anyway, let's continue. That's enough yap for the pump charge. It's my favorite weapon in the game, so pardon me for yapping a little much, but yeah, let's move on.
What do I think the worst weapon in Ultrakill is? The default Sharpshooter.
Yes,
this is the only weapon that I believe is 100% outclassed by the alternate. It's kinda like the Piercer before it got buffed. The alternate just does the same, if not more damage, and more consistently at that. The default can still output some pretty big numbers on enemies that have heads in tight corridors.
Yes.
Where the slab is useful outside of that, mostly when combined with coins. And the main thing that makes the slab better, it instantly charges the moment you press alt fire. Where the default has this weird charge period that I believe is as long as the Piercer, but then
it's
why would
slightly
I
slower.
Sharpshooter when Piercer is just
I mean, slightly faster, I mean.
Situations. The one benefit default has over the slab is the free shots, where slab only has one. That is nice if you want to use more Sharpshooter, which is only really applicable in tight corridors again. Like, I guess default is slightly better in tight areas, but slab is better in open areas. And open areas are cybergrind and 60% of the levels in the game. You can see why the slab is just better.
I mean, honestly, I'm not sure if that's exactly the metric I'm coming at this from. Obviously, the most important part of this is the fact that there's that, I think it's about 0.3 seconds of delay on the alt fire of the Sharpshooter, which is a huge problem because if you want to use those multiple charges to destroy projectiles or maybe land a really cheap headshot on an enemy a couple times, more often than not, you're not going to get that value because of the time it takes to wind up and the delay that actually stops you from firing in the first place. Now, another thing, they mentioned coins. Coins are really good with the Slurp, but that's mainly because of Slurp corning, which is heavily utilized by the fact that the Slurp itself is multiple hit scans, and those multiple hit scans cause hitting an enemy to take quite a bit of time. And because you have quite a bit of time, you can add coins, you can reuse coins, you can punch coins in the windows that you are getting that value from the Slurp, right? So you've probably seen Slurp coining. This also works. I've coined the term Slurp corning. It's a silly term, but it's just Slurp coining plus a core. You can add a core with the core eject shotgun because it's frame 1 during a Slurp coin in order to get a lot of extra value because of those hit cans piercing the core. You don't really get to see all of this with the regular Sharpshooter because the regular Sharpshooter is only one hit scan that pierces down, then up, or left to right, and that's it, right? And then maybe it does its extra couple of bounces, but more often than not, you're not going to get those bounces, and they're not going to yield any damage for you because the auto-targeting is unreliable, and certain surfaces are really uneasy. So looping back to using the Sharpshooter and coins, because it's one hit scan, you have a lot less time to add cores, to add extra coins, to do punches and reset coins to get more damage. And it also relies on the enemy having a head in the first place, which means that its damage is heavily unreliable. And with that delay, doing a coin punch into a Sharpshooter oftentimes gets you not a lot of value in less time. So yeah, there's quite a bit of arguments for why the Sharpshooter is just worse than the Slarp.
Honestly, they're not too far apart balance-wise. I just wish default had more of an identity compared to Slab. They're pretty much the exact same weapon with minor stat differences. Like, what if you could duplicate the default bullets? Maybe with split coining. Just let me throw ricocheting projectiles absolutely everywhere. But then default would be better, so buff slab damage, I guess?
Thinking of it now, this is just a completely random idea, because like I do agree it needs a buff. The only way I would personally buff it is remove the whole delay, like the 0.3 second delay, the spin up that actually lets you first use the alt fire of the Sharpshooter. Remove that entirely. Doing that means that you can more quickly react to projectiles and get that projectile destruction value, which gives its identity as a weapon with 3 charges a little bit more use. and actually separates it from the slurp. However, it might be nice. I wouldn't give it just an organic, regular split shot, where upon hitting a coin during the flash period, it just splits into 2 different shots. I wouldn't give it that. I would personally instead give it something more along the lines of, it does split, but one of them aims for an enemy and the other one aims for a projectile nearby. I think that if you are able to split its identity into something crazy like that, you should get something really nuts. I know that's kind of like batshit insane, but I really think that something like that would help diversify this weapon, especially from the Piercer, which just got buffed, by giving it a unique kind of split shot. As opposed to just giving it doubles the damage and the hit scans, right? I think it would be cool to lean more into that identity of being a projectile destroyer. So yeah, split into one enemy and other split hits a projectile nearby. I think that would be a pretty cool solution. I'd love to see how that would work. Modders, if you like that idea, get to it, all right? Anyway, let's continue.
I don't know. I don't make the game. I'm sure the devs would be able to think of something. Anyways, that's what I believe to be the quote-unquote worst weapons. Except these 4 aren't even close to bad.
Slab Marksman, yep, totally agree. It's got good style, good healing, right? Decent damage on pretty much every enemy. Attractor Nailgun, we'll have to see based on when everything gets fixed. Jump Saw, I think yes, it's pretty equal, I would say, given my argument. And then Default Piercer, definitely 100%. One of the more balanced choices here.
And evenly balanced with their alternates, and these 2 are in desperate need of buffs.
I do think that these 2 weapons definitely need buffs. And they don't need a huge nudge, just something to separate them from their ultimate variant. I think just a little bit of a numbers buff, maybe tightening that spread, maybe giving a little extra pellets to the first and second pump, or quickening the pump a little bit. Being able to pump during the draw window would be really nice for this weapon. Yeah, lots of cool solutions for weapons like these.
If you want to see me talk about more topics like this, be sure to like and subscribe.
Yeah, definitely do.
That's the end of the video, y'all.
Yeah, of course. You guys should definitely support Max's Fun. I reacted to one of his videos in the past, and he replied to it in the comments. We had a bit of a neat conversation down there. So yeah, hopefully we can have a conversation like that over this one. I really like the video. Most of your takes are pretty good. I mostly just elucidated a little bit more on certain things that most people probably didn't know. More reason as to why I would agree with you. But yeah, the pump charge take, it doesn't really matter. We both agree that it needs buffs, but I think that the gap is far larger than you might think. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. This has been Brocolite. Become a member, join the Patreon, and yeah, take care.